I squealed it, but Conor McGregor was harassing me. He tried to keep my attention and threatened me. I couldn't do anything, but at one point I decided to. I never thought my life would cross paths with someone like Conor McGregor. Not in a million years. He was a name, a face, a storm on TV, someone untouchable, larger than life. But fate has its ways, doesn't it? I wasn't prepared for the whirlwind that would pull me in, the lines that would blur between admiration and dread. It all started with an invitation. My best friend, Emily, had snagged tickets to a private event Conor was hosting after his latest fight. She was ecstatic, gushing about how it would be the party of the year, maybe even our lives. I wasn't so sure. Crowds weren't my thing, and the idea of rubbing elbows with celebrities felt like stepping into a world I didn't belong to. But Emily wouldn't hear a word of protest. "You need this, Sarah," she'd insisted, her eyes practically sparkling. "You're always cooped up at work or home. One night. One party. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it was harmless, just a bit of fun. But even as I slipped on my little black dress and stared at my reflection, a knot of unease twisted in my stomach. I brushed it off as nerves, as silly overthinking. The party was everything Emily promised and more. Music thumped in every corner of the sprawling mansion. People laughed, glasses clinked, and the air was thick with a heady mix of perfume, cologne, and adrenaline. Conor was the center of it all, magnetic and imposing, with a grin that could disarm even the most stoic. I remember Emily tugging me through the crowd toward him, her excitement contagious. She didn't hesitate, blurting out something about being his biggest fan and shoving me forward. I managed a polite smile, feeling small under the weight of his gaze. He was charming, I'll give him that, with a presence that seemed to swallow the room. "You're quiet," he said, his accent sharp and teasing. "Not used to this kind of chaos, are ya?" I shook my head, laughing nervously. "Not really my scene." He grinned, leaning in slightly, and for a moment, it felt like he was just another person, trying to make a stranger feel at ease. But then his eyes lingered too long, his words growing smoother, more personal. He touched my arm casually, lightly, but it sent a jolt through me, a strange, unwelcome mix of flattery and discomfort. I didn't think much of it at the time. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But as the night wore on, his attention became harder to ignore. It was just the beginning. And deep down, I think I knew. But I wasn't ready to face it yet. The next few days felt like waking up from a dream. I told myself that nothing had really happened at the party. Conor was a public figure, a charismatic guy who probably made everyone feel special. I convinced myself I was overthinking it, that the subtle touches and lingering glances were meaningless. But then, the messages started. It was late one evening when I saw the first one, a DM on Instagram. I didn't even realize he'd gotten my username, but there it was, "You looked beautiful the other night. Hope you made it home safe." My heart leapt into my throat. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Should I respond? Ignore it? I tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe he was just being nice. But something about it felt too personal. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Thank you. It was a nice event. Hope you're doing well." The response came almost immediately, "Better now that you've answered." I felt a strange mix of flattery and unease. Here was someone famous, someone the world idolized, showing interest in me. A part of me felt special, validated, even. But there was another part, a quieter voice in the back of my mind, that whispered something wasn't right. The messages didn't stop there. They became more frequent, more direct. He asked about my day, sent compliments that grew bolder with each passing hour. At first, I responded out of politeness, not wanting to come across as rude. But soon, it started to feel like an obligation. Emily thought it was amazing. When I told her about the messages, she practically screamed with excitement. "Sarah, do you even realize what this means? Conor McGregor is into you. This is huge." I laughed nervously, brushing it off. "I'm sure he's just being nice." "Nice? Are you kidding me? Guys like him don't waste their time being nice. He likes you. You should go for it." Her enthusiasm made me question myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being paranoid? But even as I nodded along to Emily's words, that knot of unease in my stomach grew tighter. Then came the call. It was late, almost midnight, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered hesitantly, and his voice greeted me on the other end, low and unmistakable. "Couldn't stop thinking about you," he said, his tone smooth and casual. I figured I'd just call. My breath hitched. I didn't know how to respond, caught between the thrill of being noticed and the weight of something I couldn't quite name. We talked for a while, or rather, he talked, and I listened. He told me about his life, his struggles, his victories. He made me laugh a few times, and for a moment, I felt my guard slipping. But then, just as I was starting to relax, his words took a turn. "You know, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're different. I can tell. There's something about you that's intoxicating." My heart raced. I stammered a thank you, trying to keep the conversation light, but the intensity in his tone made it clear this wasn't casual. That night, I barely slept. The weight of his attention felt suffocating, but I didn't know how to explain it, even to myself. At first, I told myself it would stop. Maybe he'd lose interest, move on to someone else, or simply forget about me. But the messages and calls kept coming, each one pulling me deeper into a situation I didn't know how to escape. I started avoiding my phone, silencing notifications just to get some peace. But even that didn't last long. He began leaving voicemails, his accent sharp and unwavering as he told me how much he thought about me, how he couldn't wait to see me again. One voicemail stood out from the rest. "Sarah," his voice was soft, almost tender. "I don't think you understand what you're doing to me. You're all I can think about. I need to see you." I deleted it immediately, my hands trembling. It was becoming harder to hide my unease. At work, my boss asked if everything was okay. "You seem distracted," she said, her brow furrowed. I forced a smile, waving off her concern. Even Emily started to notice. "You've been so quiet lately," she said one afternoon. "What's going on? Is it Conor?" I wanted to tell her the truth, to spill everything and let her help me figure out what to do. But how could I? She idolized him, and a part of me was scared she wouldn't understand. So, I lied. "No, it's not him. I've just been stressed with work." She accepted it easily, too caught up in her own world to push further. But the weight of keeping everything bottled up was crushing me. I felt like I was living in a fog, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message, the next call. Then, one evening, everything escalated. I was walking home from the subway, the air crisp and quiet as I cut through the narrow streets of my neighborhood. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I didn't need to look to know who it was. I ignored it, quickening my pace. But then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, I pulled it out, my stomach twisting as I saw his name on the screen. A text this time. "I'm in your neighborhood. Thought I'd surprise you." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes darted around the street, scanning the shadows for any sign of him. My mind raced with questions. How did he know where I lived? Was he watching me right now? Panic set in as I practically ran the rest of the way home, fumbling with my keys as I locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the phone. Another text came through. "Did I scare you? Don't worry, I'll keep my distance, for now." I sank to the floor, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't admiration anymore, it was something darker, something I couldn't ignore. For the first time, I felt truly afraid. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the streetlights outside felt like him. I kept replaying the text in my mind, dissecting every word. Asterisk, for now. Asterisk, what did he mean by that? The logical part of me wanted to believe he was just trying to rattle me, that it was some twisted way of keeping my attention. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a warning. The next day, I forced myself to act normal. At work, I plastered on a smile, answered emails, and tried to ignore the knot of anxiety growing in my stomach. But the facade cracked when I got another text during lunch. You looked cute rushing home last night. Slow down next time, I won't bite. I nearly dropped my phone. He had been there. Watching me. My appetite vanished, replaced by a wave of nausea. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. When I got home, I called Emily. Hey, what's up? She chirped, her voice light and cheerful. I hesitated, my words caught in my throat. Would she believe me? Would she dismiss it as overthinking, like I'd been doing for weeks? Emily, I finally said, my voice trembling. I need to talk to you about Conor. She was quiet for a moment before responding, her tone shifting to concern. What happened? I told her everything, the messages, the calls, the texts, and how he'd been in my neighborhood last night. As I spoke, I felt the weight of it all crashing down on me. Saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. When I finished, Emily let out a long sigh. Sarah, I don't even know what to say. This is insane. I know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know what to do. Well, for starters, you need to block him, she said firmly. This isn't okay. It's harassment, plain and simple. Her words hit me like a slap. Harassment. I'd been so caught up in the whirlwind of it all that I hadn't even thought of it that way. What if that makes him angry? I asked, my voice cracking. Sarah, he's already crossed the line, Emily said, her tone resolute. You can't keep letting this go on. If you don't set boundaries, he'll think he can do whatever he wants. Her words made sense, but the fear of retaliation held me back. What if blocking him only made things worse? What if it pushed him to show up at my door? That night, I stared at my phone for hours, my finger hovering over the block button. Every time I tried to press it, my chest tightened, and the image of his face, his piercing eyes, flashed in my mind. In the end, I couldn't do it. Instead, I turned my phone off and buried it under a pile of clothes, as if that would somehow make him disappear. But deep down, I knew that ignoring him wasn't the solution. Something had to give, and I was terrified of what would happen when it did. I spent the next few days in a haze, jumping at every sound and avoiding my phone like it was cursed. Emily checked in on me constantly, urging me to go to the police. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would I even say? That a celebrity had been sending me unwanted texts. Would they even believe me? Still, her words echoed in my mind. You can't keep letting this go on. It wasn't just the texts or the calls anymore. It was the way my world had shrunk, the way I felt trapped in my own life. I stopped taking my usual route home, started avoiding places I used to love. Even simple things like going to the grocery store felt like walking through a minefield. Then, one evening, the fear I'd been running from caught up to me. It was late, past midnight, and I was curled up on the couch with the TV on low, trying to distract myself. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional hum of traffic outside. I just started to relax when a sharp knock echoed through the room. My heart stopped. I froze, staring at the door. It was late, too late for anyone to be dropping by unannounced. Slowly, I stood up, my legs trembling as I approached the peephole. On the other side stood Conor. My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't smiling or joking like he had been at the party. His expression was serious, his eyes piercing even through the small lens. "Sarah," he called out, his voice muffled through the door. "I know you're in there. Open up." Panic surged through me. My hands shook as I backed away, grabbing my phone from the coffee table. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. He knocked again, harder this time. "We need to talk. You've been ignoring me, and I don't like that." I dialed Emily's number, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. It rang twice before she picked up. "Sarah?" she asked groggily. "What's going on?" "He's here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Conor's at my door." There was a beat of silence before she replied, her voice sharp and alert. "What? Are you safe? Did you call the police?" "I don't know what to do," I stammered, tears streaming down my face. "Listen to me," she said, her tone firm. "You need to call 911 right now. Don't open the door. Don't say anything to him. Just call." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. With shaking hands, I dialed 911, my heart pounding in my chest. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline. "911, what's your emergency?" "There's a man at my door," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He won't leave, and I'm scared." As I gave them my address and described the situation, Conor's voice cut through the air again, louder this time. "Sarah, come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stayed on the line with the operator until I heard the distant wail of sirens. When the red and blue lights flashed through my window, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly knocked me over. Conor must have seen them too, because the knocking stopped. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. I gave them the messages, the calls, the texts, everything I'd been too afraid to share before. They assured me they'd handle it, that I'd done the right thing by calling them. But as I watched the officers leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Conor McGregor wasn't the kind of man to take rejection lightly. That night, I locked every window and door, but no amount of locks could keep out the lingering fear. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't keep hiding anymore.